And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, I am going to be talking about an NBA player who I feel did not deserve to win an MVP in a specific year over another player. And again, I said that the year was 1970, so yes, we are going into the black and white era of basketball where images were in black and white and there was no colored cameras. So a lot of you guys might not actually know that there was so many players back in the day that really didn't deserve to win the MVPs that they got, but they ended up getting them anyway. And one of those players is Bill Russell. More on him in future segments, but the player that we are going to be focusing on today is 1970 MVP. If the image is going to want to display, just give me 1 second. Hold on. There we go. Willis Reed. Right. So Willis Reed, he won the MVP in 1970. He averaged 22, 14, and 2 on 51% shooting for the New York Knicks, or the New York Knickerbockers as they were called back then. Or actually, I think they're still called the Knickerbockers now that I think about it. It's just nobody uses them. But aside from that, I mean, he was a phenomenal player back in the day. I'm not saying that he wasn't, but I just don't think that Willis Reed should have won the MVP over somebody like Jerry West in this particular season. So Willis Reed, like I said before, he averaged 21, 13, and 2, but it wasn't as big of a jump in production as it was last season, because he averaged roughly the same numbers in the previous season, yet didn't win the MVP in that previous season. But he averages the same numbers in this season, but he wins the MVP in this season. It's a little bit confusing, but I would have much rather given it to Jerry West as opposed to giving it to someone like Willis Reed. Jerry West in this season, he averaged 32, 5, and 8 on 50% shooting for the Lakers. And one thing that should be taken into consideration, 32 points. So that's 10 more points on the roughly the same amount of efficiency, except it's a guard. A guard is shooting almost as efficient from the field as a center. Now, usually that doesn't happen. Usually centers, they shoot much better than guards from the field, because guards, they have to take farther shots than most centers. Most centers especially back in the day, they would back up and they would go under the basket and they'd lay the ball up or they'd dunk the ball, right? But Jerry West, he was one of those players who had to do something creative. He had to shoot a jump shot. He had to float the ball. He had to lay the ball up. He had to switcheroo. He had to do this, that, and the other. He had to take off dribble shots, all of those things. And yet he was still shooting the same amount of percentage, the same field goal percentage, on much more difficult shots. Meanwhile, Willis was able to shoot the same on easier shots. And on top of that, it's a 10-point difference. When anyone averages 10 or more points, then you'd expect their efficiency to drop off by a bit, but no. It only dropped off by 1. And the 8 assists and the 5 rebounds, they're also rather impressive as well. And a lot of people in the comments and in their head, they might be thinking, well, didn't the 1970 Lakers have Elgin Baylor and Wilt Chamberlain? And to answer your questions, yes, they did. However, those players were injured a lot in that season. I don't remember exactly. How could I remember? I wasn't even born. But I don't remember Elgin Baylor, at least when I looked at his stats, him playing that many games in this particular 1970 season. Because I do know that team was riddled with injuries, particularly from Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor. So it's not like the team was always 100% throughout the entire season. It was mainly Jerry West putting up the production. And, excuse me. Now, also, it should be noted that, Elgin Baylor in the 1970 season, he played 54 games. Yeah, I know, that's a lot of games. But Wilt Chamberlain, he only played 12 games in this season. So, and I mean, Elgin being able to only play about half of the season doesn't help matters either. So, essentially, throughout half of the season, Jerry West didn't have much help in the 1970 season. And yet, he was leading the NBA in points per game. He led the NBA in player efficiency rating, and he also led the NBA in win shares. So that goes to that gives you guys just proof that Jerry West's numbers, they weren't a result of stat padding, but they actually brought value and they brought wins for the team, and it wasn't stat padding. Now, another thing that I feel like I should mention is that Jerry West hasn't won an MVP in his career, but he definitely deserved to win several MVPs throughout his career, and this is by far one of them. Now, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think that this record is fine with Ellis Reed? Do you guys think that the MVP race was they decided correctly, they chose correctly? Would you have rather seen somebody else other than Jerry West win the MVP? It should also be noted that one of the biggest reasons why probably the biggest reason why I think the Knicks star Willis Reed ended up finishing with the MVP was due to the huge difference in team record. Again, it is a pretty staggering difference, because the Lakers, they finished second in the Western Conference or Western Division as they called it at the time, but the Knicks finished 60-22 at the time. So the win-loss difference is huge. Now, I understand it, but the Lakers were still second in the entire Western Conference. So it's not like this team wasn't winning. They weren't winning as much as Willis, I understand that, but it's not like this team wasn't winning, and it's not like Jerry West wasn't putting up crazy stats, even arguably better stats than Willis Reed. This is, if you guys remember from the previous podcast, I mentioned that team record is definitely something that should be taken into account when you're looking at the MVP. You're looking at, especially when they both make the postseason, and really that's a big decision maker for a lot of these teams. But I do have to say that if both players are averaging good numbers and they're both on top winning teams, I believe it's going to have to go down to, especially at that time, I think it should have gone down to which player was better. Especially at that time. Primarily in that particular point in time, it should have been which player was averaging better numbers. And Jerry West was by far averaging better numbers than Willis Reed, while still being in the second seed of the entire Western Conference. And I think that's the reason why he should have deserved the MVP. Now, if Willis had, comparable stats to Jerry West, if instead of averaging 22, let's say he was averaging 28 or something, then yes, I would understand Willis winning the MVP without a doubt. But 22? No. I'm sorry, but no. And that's just my opinion. And I know that recently I did not, in one of my lists, I didn't think that Kareem deserved to win an MVP that he won, I believe, in 76, where his team ended up missing the postseason, and I couldn't, in good conscience, just give the MVP to somebody who was playing on a team that did not make the postseason. That doesn't bring value. But if your team makes the postseason, you definitely bring value. And his team, Jerry West's team, was able to make the postseason. Now let me just go ahead and check to see that if I was, right on the year, because I hope I was. He won in, what was it? Yeah, it was, I believe it was 70, I believe it was 76 when he won that MVP and the team ended up missing the playoffs. Yes, yeah, they ended up with a losing record in 76. The Lakers, they had a losing record in 76. So, yeah, they had a losing record. So that's the reason why I had to not give the MVP to Kareem. But the Lakers, they have a winning record, and they have almost 10 more wins than they do losses. Obviously, that's a far cry in comparison to being 60 and 22, but his stats are also a far cry in comparison to Willis Reed's stats. So, again, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think that they picked correctly? Do you guys think that Jerry West should have won an MVP? Because, again, like I said before, Jerry West should have won multiple MVPs. He didn't win any MVP, but it's not like he didn't deserve to win MVPs. And, now that we're going into the black and white era of basketball, and I say black and white because, the pictures were in black and white. So now that we're going into that era, you're going to hear me say that a lot about Jerry West, and you're also going to hear me say that a lot that Bill Russell didn't deserve this or Bill Russell didn't deserve that. So just some foreshadowing for all of you guys. But aside from that, that's all I have on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you have a hot take, a burning question. We're all ears. It's about keeping the conversation lively. And if you really want to make sure your comment or question gets noticed, just go ahead and use Super Chat. You can hit the $ below the chat box, send in your message, and it's guaranteed to get featured on the show. It's a great way to support our channel as well. Your Super Chats help us keep the lights on and bring even more content that you love. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always go ahead and use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and tip or donate that way. And that also helps the show. You can also leave your comment there as well, and that would also get mentioned on the show. So either or works. It's your choice. Thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to